Hi everyone, my name is Emma. Today I'm going to be doing kind of a 2-for-1 video because I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in October and all of the books that I'm really excited to read in November. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first book that I read in the month of October was Caraval. This is by Stephanie Garber and it's the first book in the Caraval trilogy. This one I picked up because I am absolutely in love with Stephanie Garber's Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and while I was waiting for the third book to come out, I just needed another glimpse of that world and those characters, so I decided to pick up Caraval. Caraval follows the story of Scarlett and Donatella Dragna, who are two sisters who live on the sort of isolated Isle of Trista. They live there with their father currently because their mother went missing a few years ago, and it's not really explained what happened to her. But you know that ever since their mother's disappearance, their father has been really pretty vicious and cruel towards them, but they've always been enchanted by the idea of Caraval, which is this magical carnival that comes to a place never more than once, and it's basically this magical competition where people can compete for a prize that's really special. So it's sort of an enchanted carnival feel. So Scarlett has been writing letters to Legend, who was the man who was in charge of these carnivals her entire childhood, trying to convince him to come back to Trista even though he was there 50 years ago. Finally, when she is an adult and is about to get married, he writes back to her. They get to go to Caraval, and then all sorts of magic and adventure ensues. I gave this one 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I love Stephanie Garber's writing, and the way that she's able to describe everything so magically and whimsically and atmospherically. It's like every fairy tale lover's dream come true. Like, the main character, Scarlett Dragna, has a dress that reflects all of her moods, and there are little mini dragons that prepare food, and there's this magical contest, and it's just a really cool story. It's filled with so much whimsy, and it definitely helped to fill that gap in between reading the second and third books in the other trilogy by her. One place where I struggled a bit more with it is that some of the parts felt a little bit repetitive because the carnival takes place over a series of days, and there's definitely more and more adventure unfolding and you're uncovering more secrets, but some of the mechanics felt a little repetitive between the days. I did really like the characters. Scarlett was sometimes a little on the flatter side, but I feel like that improves too over the course of the story, so that may just be part of her general character arc. Overall, I really liked it. The funny thing about this book is that it messes with your perception of time, and so I felt myself like low-key like stressed reading it about how quickly time was passing. But I feel like that kind of adds to the whole experience with reading this book, so it was fun. And then I also have the sequel, which is Legendary. This is a different sort of edition. This is the UK Waterstones exclusive edition, and I found this on Pango Books, which is really fun, and it has like sprayed edges and stuff. But I definitely plan on reading this one in November, especially because I finished A Curse for True Love, and I need to fill that gap again since I missed that trilogy so much, so I'll definitely be picking this one up in November. The next book that I read in October was Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This is sort of a dark, gothic mystery type book with a sentient sort of haunted house. So as soon as I heard that synopsis, I was like, yeah, it's happening during the month of October. But it follows Opal, who is in her early or mid-20s, and she takes care of her brother who is in high school, and they live in a motel together because their mother passed away in a car accident a number of years ago, and so she's been taking care of him instead. They're really tied up against it. She has kind of a job that's going nowhere at the Tractor Supply Company. It's sort of this abandoned old mining town where the only people that really stay there are the ones that can't leave. So it's sort of a dismal setting. But then within this town of Eden, Kentucky, there is the Starling House, which is this mysterious house that used to home the powerful Graves family who owned the mines. But now there are a series of people who claim to be part of the Starling line who then inhabit the house and take care of it, and then when something happens to them, someone new shows up with that same last name, and so on and so forth, and this has been going on for a couple of generations. So Opal, our main character, feels somehow really drawn to this house. She's having dreams about this house, and so she ends up actually getting a job where she is working there, and more mysteries kind of unfold from there. I can't say anything more about this book really without giving away major plot points. It's definitely very gothic, dark, grim, not too horribly violent. There is some violence. I remember that the beginning and middle sections of this felt really, really, really slow, and then the ending picked up a lot, and I think based on the ending I gave it 4 stars, but probably overall for like the whole book I would maybe give it 3 stars. And there were some parts of it that were so good, and there were so many lines that were like laugh out loud funny, and I really enjoyed a lot of it. Some of it just again felt kind of repetitive, and I didn't love our main character very much. This one was a harder one. It put me into a reading slump for a couple of weeks too, which was a little rough because I think it was just kind of dark and the plot was just so different. I liked it, but it also kind of gave me a sort of existential dread, so I don't know how to necessarily explain how I feel about that, but I don't know. There we have it. The Starling House. I would recommend it if like dark gothic fantasy is your thing, because I do think that you would really enjoy this, and the house itself is really, really cool. So that is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Alright, this next book is one that I started on release day and finished within about 24 hours, and that is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is my much anticipated finale to the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy that I went on and on and on about in multiple videos over the past couple of months. This is it. This is the last one. I loved it at the beginning. You get to see a lot more of characters that you saw in earlier books. There's a really cool twist that you see in this one. There are multiple POVs as well, which sometimes is kind of hit or miss for me, but I feel like it did really work well in this. I still really love this book. I gave it 5 stars. The setting and everything like that was super cool. The relationships that you see play out in this book are also really interesting. I don't know that it was the ultra satisfying ending to this beloved series that I was looking for. There were a lot of loose threads that didn't really get finished by the end of it. And as far as I know, this is the last one in this trilogy, but I feel like she's definitely setting up something else in this world that will likely involve a lot of these characters, because their storylines just didn't get totally fleshed out in this one, and I feel like they deserve to have that happen. There is an interesting thing too where there are 3 different alternate endings depending on which special edition that you get of this book. So Barnes & Noble and Indigo in Canada have the same one, and then Waterstones in the UK has another one, and then Owlcrate also has one, which is kind of rough because then only people who have the Owlcrate subscription can actually get to see it, but I'm sure people will post it online. I was able to find the Waterstones one online, and I understand why Stephanie Garber said like, oh, like they're not canon, they were just kind of fun extras, but I feel like with the way that this ending played out, the alternate endings really did add a lot. So in my brain, I'm just gonna pretend they're canon because I feel like it helps the ending feel much more fleshed out with this. Overall, I really loved it. I still gave it 5 stars. I love these characters forever and ever, but I want more. I want more. I feel like with how the first half of the book was set up, she needed like another like 100 or 150 pages to keep that same pace and really have the ending play out as it deserved to. So those are my thoughts. This is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. The last book that I read in October was The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. I read the XX last year, and it's silly, it's zany, it's funky, it's fun. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed this one as well. This is about Vivian's cousin Gwen, who runs the Something Wicked witchy shop that they have in Graves Glen, but you really don't see much of Vivian or Gwen's mom in this one like you did in the first one, so it really just is kind of like Gwen on her own, and then of course Wells Penhallow, who is in town, who is her love interest. But I actually think I might have liked this one in some ways more than the XX, but I also like the XX better in some ways. Because with the XX, the plot really was like not super great. There were a lot of plot holes, a lot of magical stuff that didn't necessarily make sense. So I struggled a bit more with that one, but the scenery in that, with the whole witchy store and the different locations that they had in that book really sold it for me. And then with this one, I feel like the plot was a little bit more complete and the main characters had better chemistry, but you didn't get as much of that atmospheric Gilmore Girls during October vibes. So it's kind of a toss-up, and I also didn't love the plot of this one, even though it was more intact on the whole. So it's still a really, really fun witchy romp, so it was great to read during like the last week or 2 of October. I just don't know that it's like my absolute favorite ever. but I enjoyed it. I think I give it 4 stars. Okay, now diving into the TBR part of this video. You already saw where I said I want to read Legendary by Stephanie Garber, so that's the second book in the Caraval trilogy. I may also read Finale as well, that's the third one, but I have a very ambitious TBR for November, so I'm gonna try and pace myself out a little bit more. For the TBR section, I'll go ahead and start with the book that I am currently reading, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is the first book, and then the sequel is actually coming out on November 7th, which is why I'm trying to get this done before then, because it is thick. But I'm about like 130 pages in so far, so I think I can do it. In this book, the main character is a girl named Violet Soaringale, and this is at a war college called Bazagath War College, and there are different quadrants that are responsible for different things. So there is like the healer's quadrant, the scribe quadrant, which takes care of all of the history of Navarre, which is where they are, and makes records and things like that. And then there's the writer's quadrant, which is full of the dragon riders who help protect Navarre from neighboring kingdoms that keep trying to break in. Our main character Violet is extremely intelligent, but physically she's very weak. So she's accident prone, and when she does get hurt, it tends to hurt her more than it would a normal person. They don't explain what it is, but that's kind of the vibe. But her mother is a general at the war college, and she really insists that her daughter be in the writer's quadrant even though she is not physically fit to do so. So it kind of follows it from there, but I am planning on reading the rest of this book so then I can read the sequel, and I might do a little reading vlog because I haven't done one of those in a while, and I think that that would be fun, and this is such a beloved series, so I think that that would be pretty cool. So this is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and then next up on the TBR will be Iron Flame. That comes out on November 7th. But November to me is all about like dark autumn, kind of spooky, more dark academia vibes. Like, I don't know what it is. Give me the cold weather. Give me it getting dark at 5 p.m. Give me hot, wintry drinks, and that just equals dark academia in my brain. So I have a couple that I would like to read this month. The first one is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is one that I had actually started before and didn't finish, but I was kind of in like a reading slump, so I don't think I really gave it a fair shake. This one takes place at a conservatory school, especially within this sort of theater conservatory, but there are a lot of dark academia vibes with obsession and ambition and all those sorts of things. If you like Shakespeare or theater at all, you will definitely really enjoy this one because the Shakespeare stuff is very heavy. And for me, that sort of added to the dark academic whimsy of it all, so I remember really enjoying that. So it starts out 10 years after the fact, and there is a main character who is currently in prison, but you find out that he was falsely arrested for the murder of one of his fellow classmates. And then you go back in time to when they are prepping for and performing this play, and you get more hints slowly as to what really happened. I'm really excited to dive into this one, so I'm definitely going to read it very soon, and it's also only like 340 pages, so it's not super long, especially compared to some of the other books on my list. So this is definitely going to be a good one. It is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. The next dark academia book that I plan on reading is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I talked about this one a lot more in my recent book haul video, so I'll go ahead and have that link so you can see my full description on the book. But to give a super quick rundown, basically there's this kid who is brought to England to study at Oxford by some sort of sponsor or guardian, and it has a lot to do with magical realism and translation and linguistics and colonialism and some of those deeper themes. It's a thick book, but I've heard great things, and I'm really excited to read this one. So that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. And the last book that I for sure want to read in November is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. Again, in my book haul video, I talked about this one, and I had a couple of you guys say that you really loved reading this one recently, so it made me even more excited to read it. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I included it in my November TBR this year. This is a fantasy novel where there is a beloved children's book, and all of a sudden, after years of silence, the author announces that he is creating a sequel for this book, and he's hosting a sort of contest on the island where he lives to allow someone to win the only copy of the sequel. And so it follows that contest. It takes place on a sort of mythical place called Clock Island, and anything involving a bookish fantasy related competition gets an A+ in my book, so it really sounds totally up my alley, and then hearing that a couple of you also really loved it as well made me even more excited to read it. So this is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. So that is all for the official books that have made it onto my TBR, but I am also a huge winter holiday lover at heart. I love all of the Christmas holiday books, romance books, everything like that. So I'm definitely going to be reading at least probably one of those as well to get myself in the mood for the holidays. But I think I might do a bookstore vlog soon so I can go and pick out a couple that I've had my eye on and just make a whole holiday day out of it. So I'm excited for that. But thank you all for watching this video, and I can't wait to get into all of these books in November. Let me know if you've read any of the ones that I also read in October and what your thoughts were, and let me know if you've read any of the ones that I am planning to read in November. So until next time, I hope you have a wonderful week. Happy reading!